Welcome to our discussion for the topics population, demography, and global migration. So today, let's discuss what is demography and what does it constitute. So demography is the statistical study of human population in its concern with spatial analysis. So it is basically the relationship of numbers to area. So dito, tinitignan, when we say demography, we look at how much or how many individuals occupy a certain space or a certain area of the world. Kaya kung makikita niyo yung PowerPoint natin, merong picture dyan ng Earth, it signifies how demography measures the number of individuals that already populate the area of the world. So key concepts that we should always remember, the differentiation between rates and cohorts. When we say rates, it is the record of the frequency of occurrence of an event during a given time frame for a designated population. So, let's say for example, ang mga birth rate, yan, death rate, mortality rate, basically it's a record of the how much the occurrence of birth, of death are happening during a certain time frame. So, let's say for example, the birth rates for this years 2000 to 2020 signifies a change, yung pag-iiba-iba, because yung occurrence ng birth or pagkakaroon ng pagsilang sa mga taon na ito ay yun yung tinatawag nating rates, yun yung nagme-measure. When we say cohorts naman, these are measures that refer to data to a population group unified by a specified common characteristics. So let's say for example, the age cohort of 1 to 5 years old. So when we say cohorts, meron specified similarity to which you can identify a certain group. So in this case, ang ma-identify natin is yung mga bata in the age of 1 to 5 years old. On the other hand, fertility is the incidence of childbearing in a society's population. So kapag sinabing fertility, ito yung capacity of women in particular to bear children. Okay. Fecundity refers to the maximum potential childbearing ability of the women of a society. So it is sharply reduced in practice by cultural norms, finances, and personal choice. So when we say fecundity, it's the maximum potential childbearing ability of women. So ang mga naghihinder dito, ibig sabihin, ano yung mga kadahilanan na hindi na ipapractice yung maximum capacity ng isang babae or ng mga kababaihan sa isang society to childbear. So, isang example, personal choice. As women gets more educated, mas nare-realize nila yung difficulties of raising economically of a child. So, kung mapapansin nyo, may mga babae na personal choice nila not to exercise the maximum capacity of childbearing. So, may mga babae na kayang manganak ng more than 2 or 3 children, no? Pero ang question doon is why are they not exercising their full capacity for childbearing? It's because of these norms, finances, and personal choice. Kaya kung mapapansin nyo rin, kung yung mga lolo't lola natin, pansinin nyo yung mga sinaunang mga individual dito sa Pilipinas, lalo na ang dadami nilang anak, no? So meron kayong tito, tita, or in your father or mother side, baka yung tatay nyo or yung nanay nyo, 12 silang magkakapatid, or yung lolo't lola nyo, baka yung lolo nyo, 10 silang magkakapatid. So kung makapapansin, as a society progresses, develops over time, nagkakaroon kasi ng capacity for education, and besides that, changing of norms, yung mga nakasanayan, yung perceptions, beliefs, So kaya nagkakaroon ng change din dun sa choice ng mga individuals to exercise their full capacity to raise children. So demographers measure fertility using the crude birth rate or the number of live births in a given year for every 1,000 people in a population. So example, if a country has a population of 2 million and with 40,000 births a year, the crude birth rate is 20 per 1,000. So 40,000 divided by 2 million is 20 over 1,000 or 20 per 1,000. So kung mapapansin, ang tinitignan kasi dito ay kung gaano kadami, kung gaano kabilis. Crude birth rate basically looks at yung percentage or yung part to which dumadami yung population in relation to the actual number of the present population. Okay. So next, the rate is crude because its denominator includes persons who have no chance at all of giving birth. So kaya crude. The total fertility rate or TFR is more refined than crude birth rate for showing the rate and probability of reproduction among fertile females. So yun ang difference ng crude birth rate tsaka total fertility rate naman is more refined, no? Kasi ito ay more on ang kino-consider niya is reproduction among fertile females. So mortality naman is the incidence of death in society's population. So we all know of this. When we say crude death rate, it is the number of deaths in a given year for every 1,000 people in a population. So similar to crude birth rate, ganun din siya. Dinidivide in a proportion of the total population. Sa infant mortality rate is the number of deaths among infants under 1 year of age for every 1,000 live births in a given year. So ito naman kung gaano kabilis na magkakaroon ng death among infants na under 1 year of age. Life expectancy is the average lifespan of a society's population. So we all know of this as well. The age-sex pyramid is a graphic representation of the age and sex of a population. So it is also called as population pyramid. So here's an example of an age-sex pyramid. So you can see the blue block represents male and then the purple block represents the female. So kung makikita dito sa comparison between the United States and Mexico, merong parang age-sex pyramid or the population pyramid that shows how their population is characterized. So pansinin nyo, sa United States, mas merong inequalities at certain parts for male and female. Whereas sa Mexico, kung mapapansin nyo, may konting similarity yung pyramid, ano? Kung mapapansin nyo yung blue, halos similar yung ano niya sa purple blocks in terms of yung percentage of the population na male or female and yung age, no? So yon, unlike dito sa side ng United States. So the dependency ratio is a simple measure of the number of economic dependents. So this could be old or young individuals, but that each 100 people in the productivity year 15 to 64 must support. So if you're age 15 to 64, ang assumption kasi is you have already the capacity to work for in support of certain family members, which are yung young people, so yung mga below 15, and then old people who are above 64 years old, who can no longer work, no, and function in a similar way as those in their productive years. So yun yung dependency ratio. Rate of natural increase. So this is derived by subtracting the crude death rate from the crude birth rate. So it is, for example, 22 over 1,000, which is your crude birth rate. You subtract it with your crude death rate, which is 12 over 1,000. So merong 1% natural increase. Dito pinakikita yung how much so dito makikita that we have a 1% natural increase if we are going to consider those that are born in relation to those who died. So ito kasi, di ba makikita, dun kailangan mo kasi, when we talk about how much the population is changing or increasing or decreasing, you have to realize or subtract how much, gaano ba kadami yung pinapanganak sa gaano ba kadami ang namamatay. So in order to get a clearer picture of how the population is growing, no, whether it is increasing or it's decreasing. So in this case, we could say that there is a 1% natural increase as your crude birth rate is greater than your crude death rate. So the doubling time is the time it takes for a population to double if the present growth rate remains constant. So ito yung kung gaano kabilis, no, na dumami ang ating population. So in relation to the study of population, migration is also an important element as it is the movement of people into and out of a specified territory. So it may be voluntary or involuntary. So ito yung mga refugees, yung mga nabagyo, or ito yung mga nag-suffer through a war, katulad yung sa Marawi siege, no, nagkaroon ng pagkuha or pagsakop sa isang city. So yung mga individuals doon have to fly or go to another place as refugees. So voluntary migration may be explained by the so-called push and pull factors. So these are important concepts. Yung push and pull factors, these are concepts that influence migration of individuals. So movement into a territory is termed immigration and is measured by the in-migration rate or the number of people entering an area for every 1,000 people in the population. So when we say that mamigrate na ako sa ibang bansa, so you're basically called an immigrant because you are moving to another territory. The rate or the measurement of that movement, that migration, is called the in-migration rate. Whereas the movement out of a territory is termed emigration and is measured by the out-migration rate or the number of people leaving an area for every 1,000 people in the population. So when we say na migrate na ako sa US, you're basically an immigrant of the United States and an emigrant of the Philippines because you are already living or moving out of this territory. So you will be your migration can be measured as an out-migration rate. At the same time, it is an in-migration rate for the United States. So the population density refers to the relationship between number of inhabitants and the area they occupy. Kaya nga kapag sinabing mataas ang population density, ibig sabihin nun, sa Pilipinas, mataas ang population density, we have a small area, area of territory. However, the population is very, very much high. So maraming tao, pero maliit yung space. So that's when you say the population density is high. So crude density, on the other hand, is the number of people per unit area of land. So itong crude density mas specified, no? It computes or it measures how many individuals occupy a particular area or unit of land. So the demographic transition model, no, it traces the changing levels of human fertility and mortality presumably associated with industrialization and urbanization. So the growth rate began to increase around 750s and is presently extremely rapid. So ito, ang konsepto ng demographic transition model, yung pagkakaroon ng fluctuating levels of human fertility and mortality is basically associated through the development, no, that was caused by industrialization and urbanization. So minsan kasi, di ba may mga times na tumataas ang fertility rates, no, bumababa ang fertility rates because there are certain changes or transitions because of industrialization and urbanization. So Thomas Robert Malthus believed that population increased geometrically while food could only increase arithmetically, leading to catastrophic starvation. Siguro narinig nyo na rin ito na masyado ng humanity has avoided this outcome by learning to produce more food, a technological solution to a biological problem. Kasi if you're going to look at it, as more individuals are born, yung dapat supposedly, there should be more food to be produced in order to sustain the lives that are coming out, no? However, yung sinasabi kasi ni Malthus, mas madami yung rate ng pagdami ng individuals kaysa sa rate ng pagdami ng pagkain. So, ang naging solution natin is to create ways not to rely on environment alone, on nature alone in the production of food, but to produce them as resource. So katulad nun, unlike in the earlier times, no, that individuals had to rely to the amount of or kung ilan lang yung mga baboy ramo na meron sa isang forest or sa isang lugar, sa isang kagubatan. Now we can grow, we can produce more pigs, no, by through piggeries, no, yung technology of raising pigs, hogs in particular, or chicken for that matter, in order for us to have food in our table. Kasi before, if you're going to rely solely on how in the nature of the environment, no, kung gaano sila yung nature ng pag-produce, yung rate ng pag-produce ng mga animals, we can actually never sustain, no, the population. So development, urbanization, and industrialization have aided us in that endeavor. So the demographic transition models have 4 stages. So stage 1 is the pre-industrial. It is characterized by high birth rates and high death rates. High birth rates kasi nga hindi pa naman pre-industrial society ito, wala pang notion of education, wala pang notion of norms, etc. So maraming pinapanganak na bata, at the same time marami ding namamatay because wala pang notion of health practices, etc. Stage 2, onset of industrialization. So in the beginning of, or in the introduction of industrialization, there are high birth rates, but because industrialization is now being introduced, people were capacitated to avoid deaths. Stage 3 is the industrial economy. So you have declining birth rates and low death rates. And then the last one, the stage 4, is the post-industrial economy, wherein you have low birth rates and then steady death rates. So here you see, yung how the stages, is being shown as something that results to a natural increase. Meron kang makikita sa gitna that your death rate and then your birth rate, is very much centralized on stages 2 and 3 during the early industrial and the early industrial and mature industrial rate, wherein there is a rapid and slowing population growth. So here are the migration realities in the Philippines. We have, at least in 2008 pa ito, very outdated na nga itong na-present namin, 8.9 million Filipino overseas from POEA, whereas there are permanent workers or immigrants that accounts for 3.73 million or 42%, and then regular temporary migrants 48%, and then the irregular workers are 10%. So kung mapapansin nyo, marami na rin yung mga permanent workers or immigrants, yung mga considered to be citizens or nag-move, doon na sila talaga nakatira sa ibang bansa. Almost half na rin halos ng population ng mga overseas Filipinos ay mga permanent workers or immigrants. Furthermore, the top 3 OFW sending regions are those from Region 4, Region 3, and NCR, which could be said as the regions that are most in touch now with development and industrialization, at least for the country. The top OFW sending provinces are as follows. So kung nakikita nyo dyan, karamihan din ay nandito sa mga regions na unang nabanggit. So the waves of migration. So the first wave, or 1900s, agricultural workers in Hawaii and other parts of the United States. So some work in the fish canneries of Alaska. So kung mapapansin, ito yung mga sinaunang panahon, ito yung mga times ng colonization, kung saan yung mga Pilipino ay sinasama sa iba't ibang parte ng mundo in order to serve as workers in agricultural production. The second wave is in the 1960s. So this is characterized by nurses, doctors, medical technicians, mga health practitioners that are sent or that migrate in the United States, Canada, and other European countries. And also those Filipino students that go to the United States. The third wave is the 1970s, wherein the actively encouraged by the Philippine government in large numbers to fill in labor shortages in rich and industrializing countries. So as countries in the so-called global north become more industrialized, of course, they would need more workers to support their industries. And syempre, yung pinakamabilis na way to support these industries is to get workers from countries in the global south na kung tawagin, in order to fulfill the faster pace of development. The fourth wave is the feminization of overseas Filipino migration. So in 1970s, women only 12% of the overseas workforce, wherein in 1987, biglang naging 48.2, and even in 1993, 55%, and in 2000, around 64% of overseas deployment until the present time. So karamihan sa mga nagiging OFWs natin ay mga kababaihan who serve as caregivers, domestic workers, nurses, clerks, entertainers, no? So kung mapapansin, mas maraming mga kababaihan ang nagmamigrate. Thus, the real underlying problems of how children are going to be raised here when they are left with their fathers, yung mga ganong konsepto. So Philippines ranks 4th in the world next to India, China, and Mexico. So from only $103 million in 1975 in terms of overseas employment program to a high of 18.76 billion in 2010. So ganito kadami yung nakukuha nating revenues from overseas workers. So here are the positive effects of migration. A significant number of families, 2.5 million out of 18 million, relied on remittances as the main source of income. So the migration of our OFW served as a platform in order to raise the quality of life of most poor families in the Philippines. Migrant remittances, a steadier source of financial capital more than foreign direct investment, and official development aid. So just imagine how the remittances were said to be more stable in relation to sa pumapasok na foreign direct investment. Sa Tagalog, mas steady, ibig sabihin ng steady, mas regular tayo nakakakuha ng foreign remittances mula sa mga OFWs. And mind you, paano kumikita ang Philippine government sa overseas remittances? May tax kasi yung pag-transfer ng pera from overseas countries, from other countries, papunta dito sa Pilipinas. So as your parents, no, yung portion nung pinapadala nilang pera, yung parents nyo nagpadala ng certain amount ng pera mula sa US papunta dito sa Pilipinas, there are certain taxes to be paid in relation to the transfer of that funds. So kumikita ang Pilipinas in relation to that. Imagine if all overseas Filipino workers are sending their money, especially during the times of Christmas and holidays. Kaya mas madaming pumapasok din na pera sa Pilipinas in that sense as compared dun sa foreign direct investment na nakukuha natin. So yung foreign direct investments, those are foreigners who will invest their money in certain businesses in the Philippines. So kung mapapansin from this slide, sinasabi na mas meron tayong na-expect na kita or na pera, the Philippine government expects more money from foreign remittances from OFWs instead of foreign direct investments na supposedly ay mas malalaki. Kasi nga, pera ito ng mga businessmen that they will invest in businesses in the country. So, migration as development. There is a reduced incidence of poverty, gaya nga ng nabanggit ko, kasi nga, nagkaroon ng panibagong platform ang mga Pilipino to create a platform to alleviate poverty by going to another country. Remittances as a buffer to balance of payments deficits and depletion of countries' reserves. Nabanggit ko na rin to, na since nagkakaroon tayo ng kita, ang Philippine government ay kumikita dun sa mga nakukuhang remittances na pinadadala dito sa Pilipinas. Nakakabawas siya dun sa debt, kung tawagin, or utang ng Pilipinas. Financial benefits to companies and trickling effect to the poor. So, nagkakaroon ng financial benefit yung pagpapadala ng mga OFWs ng pera dito sa Pilipinas kasi nagkakaroon ng capacity to spend yung mga Pilipino ngayon. So, ang idea is ganito. You're in a typical family, no, if a mother is working abroad and then your father is the one taking care of the household, basically he does not need to work na because there's a certain member of the family, which is your mother, who is producing naman enough capital, no, for your family. Ibig sabihin pera para sa inyong pamilya. Ang point is, even though your father would not work in that sense, nagkakaroon kayo ng capacity, lahat kayong miyembro ng pamilya would now have the capacity to spend. Regardless of the fact that the only person that is working is your mother, and which is in fact not actually in the Philippines. So kung mapapansin nyo, yung ganong konsepto na hindi siya nagtatrabaho, hindi siya pinapasweldo ng mga kumpanya sa Pilipinas, pero at the same time, nakakapacitate niya yung mga miyembro ng pamilya niya to spend from these companies. Okay. So yun nga, yung brain gain. Yung brain gain na sinasabi, ito yung dahil nga nagpupunta sa ibang bansa yung mga Pilipino, lalo na yung mga magagaling natin sa technology, nagkakaroon ngayon ng brain gain yung mga ibang bansa na yung mga capacities, physical and intellectual capacities of Filipinos are being now taken advantage of other countries because nga mababa yung nakukuha nilang sweldo kung mag-stay sila sa Pilipinas. So, aside from that, migration leads to better lives. Nabanggit ko na yon, capacity to send children to good school, capacity to buy house and lot, economic status of many Filipino families has improved. So, ayan. But however, there are of course negative effects of migration. So, the first one is that the migration as maldevelopment. So, no development in source communities or dependency of families and communities. So, nagkakaroon ng problem in terms of dependency. Remittances used for consumption, not productive endeavors. Yun din ang isang negative. Pansinin niyo, mga nabanggit ko sa positive effects also serves as a double-edged sword as they are also negative effects. So, ang nangyayari ngayon, nagko-consume yung mga miyembro ng pamilya ng isang OFW without them working. That's a positive effect kasi hindi mo na ngayon kailangang magkaroon ng hindi mo kailangan i-put into labor yung mga bata, working student, etc. But kasi pwede naman silang mag-relax, maging comfortable with what their mother is sending them. However, ang problema, yun nga, kadalasan yung pinadadala is for mainly for consumption, not for productive endeavors since the mother is already there. Yung reliance, kumbaga, or dependence sa mother does not trickle down to the concept na yung pinadadala ng nanay should be used or pinalalago sana in order for it to dumami. No? Ang nangyayari, pinangko-consume. Next, economic benefits have not trickled down to the poor and less developed regions, and then yung brain drain din na nabanggit ko kanina. Aside from that, migration creates problems among the OFW and families left behind. So yun nga, yung physical separation have adverse effects to the family, marriage, and then children. Alam nyo na to, very familiar na kayo sa mga problems in relation to this. And then the communication gap that leads to estrangement of relationships. But as we all know, this problem is partially, but hindi siya totally, partially resolved by the fact that because of the growing capacity of information communication technologies or ICTs, at yung pagkakaroon natin ng access sa social media that makes everything easier to communicate. Kahit nasaan kayo sa Pilipinas, pwede na kayo mag-communicate sa nanay nyo or tatay nyo. I don't know if you have a particular experience of this na meron kasing panahon dati na ang mga OFWs na tawag lang sa PLDT, sa telepono, tapos scheduled pa kasi merong, ibig sabihin ng schedule ay sasabihin sa'yo ng nanay mo na tatawag ako ng ganitong panahon kasi para lahat ng miyembro ng pamilya nyo makausap niya kasi kasi binabayaran niya yung anong tawag dito, merong tawag dun sa pagtawag overseas call na may mahal. Ngayon kasi wala na tayong ganong problem kasi kadaling tumawag sa messenger kahit saan ka sa mundo, tatawag ka sa messenger at makikita mo pa yung kausap mo unlike dati sa telepono lang. So madali, medyo partially nagkaroon ng solution yung communication gap. Pero syempre yung physical separation nandun pa rin kasi hindi mo pa rin makakasama. Reliance on remittances, so consumerism of families. So yun nga, yung sinabi ko na kanina, per capita expenditure ay tumaas. And then the dependency of families. So kadalasan yung mga miyembro ng pamilya ng isang OFW, they resort not to working anymore because of the reliance on the remittances being given to them. So less valuation of work and education. Kasi nga kadalasan din kapag may magulang ka na sa ibang bansa, you would think of following the steps of your parents. So kadalasan lalo na kung OFW yung magulang mo, hindi mo na kailangan kumuha ng mga mahihirap na kurso, no? Like for example, engineering or whatsoever. Kasi ang kailangan mo is yung kung ano yung in demand dun sa country na pagmamigratan mo. So, we need to recognize the duality of migration na meron siyang negative and positive effects. And there is a need to minimize the social cost and maximize its development potential. The migration of OFWs in other countries is also a source of development, economically, culturally, and in all aspects. However, the problem relies now on the families being left behind, no? Because these families served as the foundation naman of the Philippines kasi sila yung natira dito sa Pilipinas. So, ang problema nun, yes, nakakapacitate tayo ng mga OFWs through their works in the other countries because nakakapagpadala sila ng pera dito sa Pilipinas. But we need to minimize the social cost that it bears na yung mga miyembro na ng pamilya nila dito sa Pilipinas tend, no, na hindi naman lahat, tend to achieve lesser because of the dependency or reliance on the remittances. So I think naman as time progresses, medyo nababawasan na yung ganun, lalo na in the present context. Lalo na din at nagkaroon ng pandemic and because of it, yung reliance sa ganung konsepto sa mga OFWs ay nabawasan dahil marami ding OFWs ang nawalan ng trabaho sa ibang bansa. So I think that's something that we can ponder on in terms of the study of population. So my next discussion is the population growth, no? A report that was made in relation to the population growth of the world. So here's the population growth, no? Teaching notes from our world in data or in data. So here's the outline. How many people live around the world today and where are they? So kung makikita, ito yung world population by world regions. Makikita na very dominant pa rin yung mga Asian countries, no? Today's population is about to 6.9% of the total number of people ever born. So ibig sabihin, 6.9% yung mga buhay ngayon is 6.9% of the total number of people ever born in all time, since the beginning of time. So, but we are closer to 7.5 billion as of 2016. Okay, just imagine kung gaano kadami na ngayon. Okay, so this map shows where people live around the world. So, ayan, nakikita natin dyan. Kung mapapansin, may konting population density dito sa Pilipinas, though medyo maliit lang ito. Pero hindi makikita nyo, may blue din. Ano? This shows how dense, no, the population is in the Philippines. Will humanity keep growing indefinitely? So the world is more populated than ever before, but growth is slowing down. The good news is growth is slowing down. So in order to study how the world population changes over time, it is useful to consider the rate of change rather than focusing only on the total population level. So kung makapapansin nyo, in 1962, the annual population growth rate peaked. Ibig sabihin doon siya pinakamataas. And since then, bumababa naman yung population growth natin. So ibig sabihin, imbes na tumataas yung pagdami ng population, kung bumabagsak pa siya, ibig sabihin yung percentage ng population growth is decreasing instead of increasing. Although, in reality, dumadami pa rin yung population, pero yung percentage ng growth, yung pagdami, is hindi na kasing taas nung katulad sa 1962. So the number of children in the world will soon stop increasing and this will lead to new economic opportunities. So the world is approaching what the late Hans Rosling called the age of peak child. So this is the moment in global demographic history at which the number of children in the world stops increasing. So ibig sabihin, dadating tayo dun sa point ng age of peak child in which yung pagdami ng mga bata sa mundo will stop increasing and we will be populated by, instead of children, no, mas madami na yung magiging more greater than the age of children. So yung mga working 15 to 64 years old. So, but the world has probably not reached peak child yet. As this chart shows, no, we are likely very closely to a long flat peak. So the number of children in the world will not increase much more. So ito yan. Kung makikita nyo, from 1950s to andito tayo sa 2020, the projected population under age 5 is ganito lang kababa, less than 2 billion individuals. No? Wala pa nga sa kalahati ng 2 billion. So globally, this means that there will be what is often called a demographic dividend, or there will be likely be new economic opportunities because mas konti na yung mga bata, no? Mas madami yung mga working individuals who will open now opportunities for economic prosperity. So how will global demographics change in the next decade? So kung katulad nung pinakita ko kanina, population pyramid, kung nakikita nyo dito, yung itong lighter blue is the population pyramid during the 1950s. So kung makikita, may hindi mas kokonti yung life, ibig sabihin ko, mas mababa yung age, no? Tingnan nyo dito sa age, hanggang 80 lang yung nagiging age, no, ng life ng mga individuals, both for men and women. But pansinin niyo, by the pyramid, population pyramid of 2017, meron ng mga individuals na umaabot ng 100 years old. And it is projected that by 2100, no, mas mataas palalo yung magiging life or years of living ng mga individuals, as well as pero yung dami din ng men and women, of course, ay dadami. Ayan, makikita nyo, madami pa rin mga tao. Pero yung life, yung years of life nila ay tumataas. So the pyramid in 2017 is wider at the top and narrower at the bottom because child mortality is falling. So the risk of death is now more concentrated at older ages. In 2100, the pyramid will be almost like a box. There will be much less inequality in life expectancy. So most people will survive young ages, and deaths will tend to take place at a more advanced age. So the projected population under age 5. So makikita nyo, in terms of the projected population under age 5, this table shows na by 2100, mas madami pa ring mga batang under age 5 sa Africa and sa Asia, no? So the available projections show there will be important changes in the regional composition of people across different age groups. So kung makikita, the changing demographics will imply that by 2100, half of the world's children under age 5 will live in Africa. So mas maraming bata ang nasa Africa and sa Asia by the time of 2100. What's the link between population growth and development? The link between population growth and development can be understood through a simple model na nabanggit na kanina, which is the demographic transition model. So the model of demographic transition has 5 stages. Dun sa nabanggit ko kanina, 4 pala, which we explain in the next chart. So, however, ito pa rin yun. Nagkaroon lang ng stage 5, which represents more likely the present, the observations or predictions for the future life in the earth. So kung mapapansin nyo, stage 4 and then nagkaroon ng stage 5, which is the rising again, no? So if you look at stage 5, the population potentially starts growing again. The evidence here is limited, but the idea is that further social and economic opportunities may raise fertility again. Kasi ang assumption, by the end of stage 4, population growth will stop, no? Low fertility catches up with low mortality. Pero syempre kasi magpe-predict ka na ulit after stage 4 what will happen next. So ang assumption is magkakaroon ulit ng cycle to which fertility will increase again. So this chart shows the demographic transition in action for 5 very different countries in Europe, Latin America, Africa, and Asia. So kung makikita nyo, yung pattern ay malinaw. There is a decline of mortality that starts the population boom, and then a decline of fertility which ends the population boom to an end. So kung makikita nyo dito, for example, meron tayong yung birth rate, kung makikita nyo, bababa siya, tapos doon naman magkakaroon ng rise in death rate. Okay? Similar din dun sa mga iba, merong dito sa Germany, kung makikita nyo, merong pagbaba ng birth rate, pero pag-rise ng death rate, kaya nagkaroon ng end sa population boom. So basically, ganoon yung sinasabi, this is one of the most important lessons from demography. The population boom is a temporary event. So yung iniisip natin na dadami ang mga tao, yes, that is true, but the population boom, yung yung constant na pagdami is basically temporary because when the birth or fertility rates declines, no, nagkakaroon kadalasan ng increase naman sa mortality rates, thus the end of the population boom. So how does development lead to smaller families? So parents choose to have smaller families when they can be confident that their children will survive and thrive. So makikita dito, this chart shows that the average number of children per woman tends to be higher in countries where child mortality is higher. Kaya kung makikita nyo dito, yung mga African states, kadalasan sila yung nandito sa mas mataas na child mortality rate. At the same time, sila din yung mararaming anak. Ano? Asa ng Philippines, andito tayo sa 2%. Nasa gitna tayo ng 2 to 4% na mortality rate. So 3%. At the same time, ang average children natin ng isang babae ay 3. So kung mapapansin, hindi tayo madaming magkaroon ng anak na because parents choose to have smaller families. At the same time, hindi naman tayo mataas ang mortality rate. Women's educational attainment versus fertility 1950 to 2010. So the choice of having a child requires parents, but especially mothers, to consider the opportunity cost that come with children. So example, risking health, lower earnings, etc. So kung makikita nyo, education drastically affects the opportunity cost. So yung education, ang sinasabi dito, as women tends to become more educated, syempre mas na-realize niya yung cost, no, ng pagkakaroon ng anak. At saka hindi lang naman yung cost, yung idea, of course, of the responsibilities of being mother. As you become more educated, nagkakaroon kasi you're being capacitated to do more things, no, to achieve more things. Thus, yung responsibilities that come with childbearing is of course something that you have to consider and weigh in order to get the things that you might want to achieve in life as a woman. So kung mapapansin, asan si Philippines dyan? Andito. Kung makikita nyo, average years of schooling of women in reproductive age. Nandito tayo sa mga nasa gitna ng 8 to 10. So bali mga 9 yan. In relation to the demographic in total fertility. So kung makikita nyo nga, katulad nung pinakita doon na nasa average ng 3 yung children ng mga kababaihan dito sa Pilipinas. Ganun din yan. Nasa gitna tayo na mas madami tayong na-educate na ibig sabihin yung years of schooling natin. Years of schooling ha. So this includes your years in kinder up until grade school and high school. So papapansin nasa 9 years. Kung 9 years yan, kadalasan na kakaabot tayo kadalasan sa high school. So kung mapapansin, mas mataas yung na-achieve natin. Kaya yung total fertility rate natin also reflects in how we see reproduction, no? Kasi kahit fertile ka, kung gumamit tayo ng contraception na mababanggit mamaya, mas malo-lower yung fertility capacity ng isang babae. So births per woman by income level. So yan, medyo hindi na natin makita. This chart shows that in countries with higher average national incomes, families tend to be smaller. And within countries, richer families also tend to be smaller. So kadalasan daw, yung mga bansa na mayroong matataas na national income, kadalasan yung mga pamilya doon, maliliit lang, no? Composed of the mother, father, and 1 or 2 children. And within countries, richer families also tend to be smaller. Tapos, bukod pa doon, yung mga mayayaman na talaga doon sa bansa, kadalasan ay kakaunti. So, pansinin nyo rin, i-search nyo yung mga buhay ng mga mayayaman. Sila Lucio Tan, sila Henry C. Kadalasan, no, though not necessarily applies to everyone, pero kadalasan hindi sila masyadong madami sa pamilya, no? Hindi sila kadalasan actually, kaya lang sila nagiging madami if they are composed of 4 to 5 children is because meron ding actually na notion na you have to have more children if you have a rich family, if you want these family members to inherit, no, the management of your businesses. Siyempre, kung isa lang ang anak mo at 5 yung businesses mo, mahirap naman para sa isang anak lang. So you have to rely the 4 other businesses to other individuals outside your family. So may ganun ding logic na kailangan i-consider yung mga mayayamang pamilya. in relation, family size is also partly determined by social norms and views on the role of women. So kung makikita nyo dito, ma'am, bakit po may cable TV access and preference for a son in India? Kung titignan nyo yung table, yung mga never had cable TV, pansinin nyo, kadalasan sila yung mas gusto na magkaroon ng anak na lalaki. Kasi nga, a study found that the introduction of cable television in India exposed people to new lifestyles, no? And this led to a decrease in son preference and an increase in women's autonomy and a decrease in fertility. So kung mapapansin nyo, bukod sa kasi yung cable TV access is a representation of development, is a representation of opening people's eyes to various concepts of what is a woman and what woman could achieve and what women can do. So kung mapapansin, bumababa ngayon yung preference sa pagkakaroon ng lalaki lang na anak. Nagkakaroon ngayon ng konsepto na women can actually do what men can do as well. No, so yun. In terms of unmet need for contraception among married women of reproductive age, in 2013, in surveys on desired family size in which men and women are separately interviewed, men usually report a larger ideal family size and a lower demand for contraception. On the other hand, there's a large number of women who do not want to get pregnant but are not using contraception. So yun ang problema. Madaming kalalakihan na kadalasan kasi in families, mas madaming lalaki talaga na, at saka yung lalaki talaga ang mas may gusto na magkaroon ng maraming anak. Ang problema, women naman, on the other hand, would not want to bear more children because of what I said earlier, no? Kasi ang mangyayari doon, malilimit ka kasi doon sa mga pwede mong gawin if you have responsibilities as a mother. But besides that, syempre yung talagang reality that you have to support, no, children, many children, if you are to bear children, maraming anak. So sa babae, women realize that problem. Pero ang problema, because of less access to contraceptives, yung capacities to limit fertility, ang nangyayari ngayon ay dumadami pa rin yung mga anak, no, regardless of the fact that women supposedly would not want to extend the number of family members if they're as compared to the men. So what should be the role of policy when it comes to population control? So coercive population control measures violate rights and are ineffective. So if you are familiar with the one-child policy ng China and Taiwan, meron po kasi ito from 1945 to 2015. Yung one-child policy basically encourages Chinese families to just have one child and then do reproductive ends, no? Ibig sabihin magkaroon na ng permanent, no? Magkaroon ng permanent na pag-contraceptive para isa lang talaga magiging anak mo. So it might be yung itatali na yung ovaries ng babae or uterus ng babae in order not for her to bear children, or sa lalaki naman magpapabasectomy in order for the family to not have more children. However, ang sinasabi kasi dito, the one-child policy never experienced yung decline that was aimed, no? Yung ini-expect na magiging decline sa population was not there. Similar evidence in India, the sterilization camps from the 1970s were also proved to be ineffective. So kung makikita nyo, this is the total fertility rate of children per woman, no, sa China. Kung mapapansin, may pagbaba in 1960s, tapos tumaas in 1965, similar to what was presented earlier. Tapos nung inintroduce yung one-child policy in 1980s, no, kung mapapansin nyo, fertility in China had already waived before the introduction of the one-child policy. So meaning, even if the one-child policy was not introduced, bababa naman kasi talaga siya, no? So kung pero pansinin niyo, kahit na-introduce yung one-child policy, look at this part, no? Na naging matagal bago bumagsak ulit in a certain period of time, bumagsak ulit yung population or yung fertility rate. And at the same time, look at this part. in 2000s to 2015, naging stagnant na siya or continuous. Di ba kung mapapansin nyo, if it's still in effect, dapat sana dire-diretsong downward yan, no? Pero kung mapapansin nyo, merong matagal na pagbagsak, at the same time, meron naman steady effect in this part or in these years. So the demographic transition is already happening, but policies can help speed things up. So if one-child policies don't work, no, and it actually violates rights, no, kasi merong, kahit na sabihin mong may mga tao na gustong konti lang anak, syempre may mga tao pa rin na gusto nilang marami yung maging anak nila. So it violates your right, it violates your capacity to choose, it violates your beliefs, no? Kasi kung pinalaki ka sa ganung konsepto. So ito yung mga possible. How long did it take for fertility to fall from more than 6 children per woman to fewer than 3 children? So it would be wrong to assume that people in poor countries where families are larger need external help to control their fertility. As this chart shows now, fertility rates in poor countries are declining faster than they did in rich countries in the past. So nung mga sa number of years na ito, kung mapapansin nyo, mas madami pa rin yung decline sa mga poorer countries kung tutuusin. But of course, policies can help speed things up even more. So as we have shown here, policies that promote child education, health, and better economic and social opportunities for women are effective population policies. Kasi ang pinakikita nito, ang tanong kasi dito, di ba, how long did it take for fertility to fall from more than 6 children per woman to fewer than 3 children per woman? So ang tanong dito, kunwari kuha tayo ng African state, Tunisia, no? Pansinin niyo sa Tunisia or South Africa na lang, pansinin niyo sa South Africa, it took 34 years, no, for fertility to fall from 6 children per woman to 3 children. As compared to the United Kingdom, pansin mo, sa United Kingdom, it took 95 years for that fertility rate to go down. So kung mapapansin niyo, yung relatively mas mahihirap na countries, kung tutuusin, hindi sila matagal magbaba ng fertility rate. Ibig sabihin, they do recognize the need to lower the fertility rate in order to lower the population and thus support the children that are being born and lessen the death rate. Pansinin nyo, Bangladesh took only 20 years. Iran, 10 years. And Malaysia, which is the only Southeast Asian country, took 37 years. Relatively high pa rin. Pero kung mapapansin, yung konsepto na hindi siya ganito katagal as compared to your relatively industrialized countries such as UK, Poland, US that I have told you about before, mas matagal, sobrang tagal nung naging process or nung growth, nung pagbagsak, or sorry, hindi growth, nung decline ng fertility rate sa mga bansang ito. So ano ang kailangan? Kaya nung sinabi, 37 years per Malaysia is still long. So we can do policies in order to shorten this, in order to create lesser time frame for women to realize choices, no? To realize choices, to educate women, to promote social and health advantages for individuals. So for resources, ito yon, dito kinuha to, our worldindata.org, indata.org, in order to supplement. I hope this PowerPoint presentation brings up a light in terms of the population, the present population growth in the Philippines, in the world, although it's a little bit outdated kasi na mga 2016, 2015 yung mga at least it gives you a picture, no, that there's a certain concept of the population boom coming to an end. So next topic that I will be discussing is global migration, and we will talk about the concept of how population, the present number of individuals now moves, no, from one place to another. So kung mapapansin, yung concept ng population density, yung dami ng tao sa isang lugar, is being affected by the concept of migration. Actually, may kinalaman din ito sa Global City. Kung napanood nyo yung video that I posted in our Google Classroom, kung di ba binanggit doon ni Miss Heidi na yung concept na the global cities are mostly populated because the opportunities there invite individuals to work. So dahil yung mga global cities, maraming opportunities, economic opportunities, ang ginagawa tuloy natin is we go there in order to grab easier opportunities as compared kung magsistay ka sa provinces or sa hinterlands kung tawagin. So let's talk about migration. So here is our discussion of global migration. So what should we expect from this lesson? Basically is to understand what migration is, the issues that comes with it, and the experience in the Philippines of migration. So what is migration? Gaya na nabanggit ko na kanina, it refers to the movement of people into and out of a specified territory. So nabanggit ko na rin to kanina, yung internal migration, which is the movement of people. Ay, ito hindi nabanggit natin kasi immigration at saka emigration pala yung nabanggit natin. Pero meron ding konsepto ng internal migration. So kunwari, the movement of people from one area of one country to another. So kunwari, galing ka sa Nueva Ecija, magmamigrate ka na sa Baguio or sa Maynila, no? While international migration is the movement of people from one country to another. Okay. So classification of people who cross borders from one country to another. So meron tayong tinatawag na immigrants. So nabanggit ko na to. People who move permanently to another country. Migrant workers, those who stay mainly for work in another country for a fixed period of time. So based on contracts, etc. When we say illegal migrants, those who do not actually have legal documents in entering another border. Kadalasan, undocumented workers sila kasi ang ginagawa nila, papasok sila sa isang bansa as a tourist and then they will stay there, no? So, nag-expire na yung tourist visa mo, nag-work ka, so pero wala ka kasing contract, so wala undocumented ka migrant. Petitioned immigrants, so family members that is or are petitioned by an immigrant. So, we are very familiar with this. Refugees or asylum seekers. So those who were unable or unwilling to return to their country due to the fear of persecution brought by their race, religion, nationality, etc. Okay. So international migration, 247 million na as of 2018 estimated number of people living outside the countries of their birth. So, pinanganak ka sa US, pero dito ka nakatira sa Pilipinas. Pinanganak ka sa Pilipinas, pero nakatira ka sa US, etc. Kadalasan ng reasons for migrating or migration is 90% economic reason. And then 10% kadalasan ay refugees. Kasi if you should know mga students, madami talagang refugees, lalo na sa mga war-stricken countries like yung nasa Middle East, and yung sa South Africa, yung mga African states wherein they need to flock, umalis dun sa lugar nila in order to create a certain life for themselves. Kasi kung magsistay sila dun sa place nila na lagi namang merong nagiging bombahan or nagkakaroon ng barilan, etc., they cannot live a good life, no? Kaya ang ginagawa nila, they serve as refugees sa another country. So, ang nangyayari doon, may mga countries na tumatanggap ng refugees. So, kapag isang bansa na tumanggap ng refugee, ang mangyayari ngayon, yayakapin mo yung mga taong ito bilang citizen mo na. So, giving them the benefits that your citizens will also enjoy. Kaya kadalasan, marami din itong mga refugees na ito. So, top 3 regions of origin. Okay, so dito nang gagaling kadalasan, Latin America, Eastern Europe and Central Asia, and then Middle East and North Africa. Top sending countries. So yung top sending countries are India, Mexico, and then China. And then the top receiving countries are mostly Middle East, with the United States topping the list. So 50% of global migrants are from the developing countries moving to the developed countries. So these migrants consist of approximately 40 to 60% of the labor force of the developed countries. So papansinin, relatively high na yung number ng mga immigrants or migrants na nanggaling sa developing countries papunta sa developed countries to serve as parts of the labor force ng developed countries. So are migrants assets or liabilities to receiving countries? So receiving countries or countries of destination see international migration as a problem actually because the solution, because syempre ang mapapansin nyo, dumadami yung tao sa bansa nyo. These individuals are not necessarily your citizens, no? Na hindi, actually, by birth, hindi mo sila citizen, but they can be naturalized. So pwedeng maging citizen mo sila eventually. Pero ang point is, dumadami yung mga tao sa bansa mo na hindi mo talaga citizen in the first place. However, they help naman in improving your economy through serving in the labor force of your industries. The solutions, therefore, are to create stricter immigration policies. Kaya mahirap na din talagang mag-migrate ngayon. Return policies and providing development aids to sending countries. So, ang gawin mo na lang din is to enable the sending countries, yung mga developing countries, in order for them to lessen the number of immigrants or migrants na lilipat from their country to the developed ones. So, the fear of international migration having an adverse effect to native-born citizen is invalidated by the report of the OECD. So mapapansin, meron ding fear yung mga, citizen ka ng US, tas maraming dumadating na mga migrants, no? Siyempre kung native-born citizen ka, yung fear mo ba na yung culture of course would change. Yung economic opportunities na dapat sana ay present for you, you will now have to compete with these migrants. So yung ganong mga effects and risks are present. So, most receiving countries have anti-migrationist strategy because they believe that migration should stop. Maraming developed countries believe na dapat mag-stop na yung migration because of what I said, no? Yung mga native-born citizens nila now have to compete for economic opportunities, and yung culture that was supposed to be authentic in their country, nagiging iba kasi nga, kung Pilipino ka or Chinese ka, pupunta ka sa US, nagkakaroon ng fusion, no? Nagkakaroon ng fusion ng culture. Receiving countries would argue that the lack of economic development of sending countries led people to move to rich countries. So totoo naman din to. Yung lack of economic opportunities, yung kahirapan, poverty, hunger, serve as reasons for individuals from developing countries to migrate to rich countries. So benefits and challenges of international migration. So kung makikita nyo dito, yung benefits basically more on remittances, no, creation of jobs, no, improvement of quality of life, and the purchasing power of a migrant's families double. So nabanggit ko na to kanina. Yung challenges, yun nga, yung brain drain. Maraming professionals ang umaalis dito sa Pilipinas, pupunta sa ibang bansa. So yung expertise nila mas nagagamit na take advantage ng mga foreign countries as compared kung dito sana sila. Problem of immigrants to integrate, no, to culture of new home country. Ito naman din. Kadalasan, hindi naman necessarily na pag Pilipino ka pumunta ka sa ibang bansa, na i-share mo agad yung culture mo. Basically, ikaw pa nga ang naku-culture shock. Kasi lalo na sa mga Middle East countries, no, kung mapapansin, dahil very strict yung paniniwala nila, no, kaya papapansin mas mahirap mag-adapt, no, as compared kung pupunta ka sa more liberalized countries such as the US or Canada or whatsoever. So human trafficking, this is also a problem with international migration. There is international anti-trafficking law, also known as the Palermo Protocol, that defines human trafficking as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of threat or use of force. So marami ito, ang human trafficking isinasakay sa bangka ng patago or isinasakay sa barko ng patago in order to migrate one person to another place. Ang purpose din nito is to